Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and as you probably know if you've been watching this show, after each year's elections, I try to really shift gears. It starts to be the holiday season, and we try to focus on ways that people can do things during this season that don't just add to our collective collections of stuff, but that really make a difference locally, nationally, and globally. So with that in mind, my guests tonight are Bill and Ann Wernau. Bill has been on the show several times. I think it's Ann's first, but Bill has been the area coordinator for Heifer for quite many years, probably at least a decade, I think. Yeah. And Ann is recently retired from Safe Futures. So we will focus on those two charities, but we're going to talk about other ones as well, because there are a lot of things we can do that really do help the world and get us in the spirit of the season more than spending time in a shopping mall will. So welcome Ann and welcome Bill. And I guess, Bill, why don't you start out and just talk about Heifer, how you got involved, and give a little overview of what it does.
Okay. So Heifer's a cow. It's a young cow. Hasn't had a baby yet. So why would you name an organization after a cow? Well, I got involved in this when I joined the Niantic Community Church with Ann, and we found that this church had been donating money to this organization we had never heard of for a number of years, and it actually bought a goat through Heifer International, and that went to a young lady in Uganda who was 9 years old, never been to school, and because of that goat and the milk that goat produced, was able to go to school, and all her brothers were able to go to school. And she eventually wound up at Connecticut College, which was, to me, an amazing thing. So I got to meet her when she visited the church, and we found out that because of her goat, and one of the principles of Heifer is when you get an animal, the first female offspring you have to pass to another family, and they have to do the same. So eventually a lot of families get goats or cows or camels.
So really it's a very sustainable gift.
Exactly. It's biology at work. So as a result of this, hundreds of children actually got to go to school because of the goat. And that goat had been purchased by the Niantic Community Church's Sunday school children. So, so that's when I got involved. I started to raise what they call ARCs, which are two of every animal. You know, the animals went on by twosies. And we, we're doing it as a church, and we have raised many ARCs, about 27, I think, so far, which is very beautiful. And in the spirit of season, today is first day of Hanukkah.
It is.
And I have a quotation here from Micah, which I'll read, and then you can focus in on it if you'd like. Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? So Heifer's been working on that for a long time, helping people in various places around the world receive animals, which gives them a source of capital so they can, have a sustainable life. So after they get their first animal and they pass on the first offspring, they continue to have more animals, and those are theirs. And people build houses, do all kinds of things from the animals. So that's how I got involved, and been offered to coordinate the volunteer work in Connecticut and Rhode Island, and realized, working locally is better. So as a consequence, found people to do all the other places. Like we do southeastern Connecticut, somebody does northeast and so forth, and somebody does Rhode Island. So as a result, we get the word out to people about what this organization does, which is one of the top 10 charities in America, and it's really known for its effectiveness. So, when the Haitian hurricane came, Heifer works in Haiti. They were one of the first organizations, because they work on the community level, to get all the people back on board again who had
Wow.
lost animals or homes and stuff, because they work together as a community. It's a very much community-based organization.
Now, one of the, as I understand it, one of the ideas behind heifer is you're not just giving a cow or a goat. It's really planning for the economic development of the region.
That's right.
So what other pieces are there of the puzzle that make it all work?
Right. So at the very basic level, people get trained in a community group, empowering women mostly, because women are not empowered in a lot of these countries. So the women form the basis of a community group, and then they get trained in how to take care of the animals, how to use the animal manure for the agriculture. They're provided with seeds for agriculture. People aren't just eating meat, or
Yeah.
milk. They're using, as you can see, if you have a picture of this,
Zoom in.
they actually use the animal products to grow more vegetables and things, so more productive. If you give someone bees, for example, their garden will be much more productive, and they can sell the honey and the wax and things like that. So here's some people, look at the size of those cabbages.
You know, for a few years we had bees in our backyard, and I will tell you, those couple years we had more strawberries than any time before or after, because the pollinating that the bees did made a huge difference.
Right. So when I was in Armenia, I could see somebody had like a dozen beehives set up, and that was helping them, because they were living on $1 a day before that. So that really made a difference to their lifestyle. The other thing is, when you get to a larger scale, since it's community-based, getting the communities to work together to form co-ops. So in Heifer USA, for example, in Arkansas, they've formed 2 co-ops, one for animal products and one for fruits and vegetables. The farmers own the co-ops, right? These are all Appalachian people, right? They own the co-op, and then they sell their products to the co-op. They don't have to go to a farmer's market or go to a grocer someplace. They sell to the co-op. The co-op takes care of the marketing. As a result, they spend a lot more time at the farm, much more productive, and they're able to sell these products, which are now branded, and they're organic, and chefs love them, because they're the high quality stuff, and they're able to make much more money that way than if they were trying to do it before, because before they had no access to markets. So they can only plant so much, because otherwise it would be wasted. Now they can plant as much as they want and sell it.
I've heard that that's even a problem here, or has been. There are quite a few farms in Connecticut, and there are an increasing number of farmers markets, but it is very difficult for farmers to necessarily be able to predict how much they should plant, because you don't want to have excess of the wrong stuff.
So to deal with that, Heifer does this, but also they do this in Connecticut, the CSAs, the Community Supported Agriculture. So before the farmer even plants anything, they sell shares of the crop. And then every week, people will come and get a basket of whatever they've planted. This protects the farmer, because if the farmer is, let's say there's a bad year, I don't know, say gypsy moths start eating your cabbage or something, you're protected because you've already sold shares. And people understand that they're actually supporting the farmer. It's a form of insurance.
Yeah, in fact, that's really what all insurance ought to be. I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked on a subject of what insurance is becoming, but it was founded on the principle that we can share risk, or we can share benefit, because we are kind of all in it together, and it has less of a negative impact if it's spread around.
So the latest thing with Heifer, beyond all that, at the highest level, would be that initially Heifer would help people that were just basically drowning. Then, they weren't that resilient at that point. Something else happened, they were drowning again. So we call that like the A state, okay? Yeah. Then we move into the B state, where they're doing pretty well, but they're still not resilient. And then at the C state, they're resilient. So Heifer's effort is to get 2 million families to that C state, this in this coming couple of years, so that they have other sources of income which are based from the training that they receive. So, if you diversify your crops, and maybe you also, if you have llamas and you get wool, you're also making products. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to make them more resilient. And this is critical because with global warming and things, there's no predicting what might happen to your agricultural base.
Well, this past hurricane season has been really unusual. So it's important not to depend on one crop.
Yeah, so Heifer actually has experimental projects in the dry highlands in Central America, in very dry areas in Africa, and in very wet areas, and in the mangrove swamps along the Pacific coast of the Americas to diversify those people's economy. So.
Now, you mentioned Appalachia, and you mentioned Central America and Armenia. How many places does Heifer have projects going in?
Well, historically, there have been over 125 countries, but after World War II, for example, they were in Germany and France and Italy. Restoring the animal population there, it was with thousands of seagoing cowboys taking animals over. Now they're down around 50 countries. The big area of poverty is Asia, South Asia, most of the poverty in the world, and then parts of Africa. And we have clusters of it in Central America and stuff, but in terms of total population, so they're very intensely focused in those areas.
So you mentioned that Niantic Community Church, buys animals and does, activities with the kids. But what other ways can people contribute or, buy into this?
Okay. Well, we actually have a catalog someplace, which I can't find at the moment. The Heifer catalog, or you can go to heifer.org, which I would recommend. You go to the heifer.org website, and they have any animal you want to buy, or if you just don't like animals to buy, you want to buy trees or fish, or you can support a project in a particular country and make a donation. So if the country's project costs several $1 million, your $100 goes into that pool that makes that several $1 million eventually. So that's one thing you could do. You can also volunteer and get in touch with me at William Wernau at gmail.com, and I'd be happy to help. Or if you're at a congregation or you're in a school, I come in and speak to congregations and schools. For example, I got...
Now, do you have a lot of student groups that do this?
Yeah, I've had many different ones, like this one here, see? All the children thank me for coming to their classes and talk to them about Heifer. Actually, it's not just Heifer I talk about world poverty, what it's really like in the world, So this is important. Teachers want their kids to know that not everyone lives a privileged life, So I talked to them about that, and I've had several of these. There's another one, and it's an interactive presentation. And then the children decide themselves whether they want to do a fundraiser or whatever they want to do. Some made jewelry and sold it to, or they made snacks and sold them to the teachers. When I go to congregations, the Heifer has congregational resources that can be used. They have an ARC project, it's a nice little calendar, and the children read the little funny thing there about some animal, and then they put a dime or a quarter in a little ARC bank and turn it in at Easter or Christmas or whatever. And then we have the Animal Crackers curriculum, which they can use for Sunday school. We have one for Jewish and one for Christian congregations. There's lots of fun activities in there for each. Makes your job easier as a Sunday school teacher. We have a lot of things like that I can, introduce congregations or schools to. We just had an alternative gift market at the Niantic Community Church over 2 weekends, and we raised $2,010.
Wow.
Which is great. You know, so people, you know, so you give a card to them, and so let's say someone gave $100 or $10. For every $10, they can get a card, and then send it as an alternative gift to somebody that they love, like a grandparent who doesn't want any more junk in their house.
Yeah, we can all relate to that.
Yeah, so you get this thing, and you're very proud of my grandchild for doing this, right? It's a great gift, you know. And a lot of grandparents are giving it to their grandchildren to pass that idea on to future generations.
Now, when you're going into classrooms or into Sunday school classes, do you find the students are kind of shocked to learn about the kind of problems that their counterparts around the world might be living in?
Some of them are, yeah. I remember one time the teacher was saying, one child dies of hunger or diseases related to hunger every 5 seconds. And she waited 5 seconds. That's 1. And she waited 5 more seconds. That's 2. By the time she got to the 3rd one, this kid jumped up. We have to do something about this. Okay? They don't know. They don't know how bad it is. You know?
No, and I'm thinking even the most impoverished people here, their lives don't compare to the lives of people in some of these other places where you can't even count on having clean water.
Right. We have social net here to support people. In these countries, you're on your own. If your crop fails, your neighbors are not going to help you because they need every bit of their food to get through the lean season. So that's what happens. People, a lot of people are not going to stay there and die. You know, they'll move to some barrio or whatever in the outside where they have no plumbing, no electricity, and try to find work, and a lot of times they can't. On top of all that, we have these refugee crises around the world, which are horrendous. I just met a woman from the Sudan who spent 16 years in an Egyptian refugee camp, and she was at our Niantic Community Church market selling,
pastries,
little cake things. 16 years. Can you even imagine being in a refugee camp for 16 years?
No,
it
is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned, and we'll shift gears a little bit now, that we do have safety nets here, even though more than, I think in my memory as an adult, there are a lot of people out there hurting in our own community. There are safety net services, and Safe Futures is one of them.
Yes.
So maybe you can talk, Anne, a little bit about how you got involved with Safe Futures, and then what they do and what your role is now.
Okay. So Safe Futures has been around. We're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, this year. So there's lots of activities and fundraisers and all kinds of stuff going on. But when Safe Futures, which used to be called the Women's Center of Southeastern Connecticut, first got started, nobody really knew what the extent of the problem of domestic violence and sexual assault and all of these issues that we now deal with, how extensive it was. We started out as a phone service at the Branford House in Groton in Avery Point, just for women to call who it was at that time people getting back into the workforce. And almost immediately, women were calling and saying, yeah, I could use some help with resume writing or dress for success or whatever they were offering. But do you have any services for people who are struggling in relationships or somebody who's been raped? And immediately, I wasn't there then, but I was with the agency for 25 years. Everybody shifted gears, and we became an agency to help people who were living with people that they were scared of. And so I got involved actually because at the time I was working for an agency, doesn't exist anymore, called Concern. Used to be in New London, and I was counseling women in prison who were ready to come out into the New London community. And what's your plan, this and that. And sadly, that agency lost its funding. And so I came over to the Women's Center then and said, hey, can I do anything? I have access to the jail. I have clearance, blah, blah. So I started doing a program at the prison for women who had been in domestic violence situations.
Which I'm guessing was a very high number of them.
Huge number, huge number. And I offered an 8-week educational program, at which point if they were serious about really wanting to get support and all of that, if they took the class, this was the jail's rules, but they could then be part of their support group. So that's how I started out. And then a wonderful woman who worked at Safe Futures, we had very little education going on. And she had a vision. She said, instead of just being a crisis agency, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could work in prevention? And she knew that I was a school teacher. That was my training. I was a school teacher. And she said, Ann, do you think if I get a grant, you could either invent or research violence prevention lessons, curricula, and I can't promise you more than a 9-month position, 15 hours a week. I said, I'll take it. I was a mother, I had young children, and that was 25 years ago. And what we found was, I went to schools I was familiar with. My children were at, or local schools, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you fell out of the heavens." And so the local schools really embraced and wanted our prevention programs, which are very much about communication skills, managing emotions, problem solving. How do we solve conflicts without arguing, without hurting each other? And then in the high schools, we teach a dating program, a healthy relationship program, which has been, again, New London High School, Groton, Griswold. I could go on and on. But the problem is every school wants it, and especially this year, funding is being reduced in the schools, and so it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
And it's kind of sad because, as any of us who read the news know, that the problems of people being assaulted in unhealthy relationships, it's really out in the news now. We've seen many powerful people named as abusers from 25, 30 years ago when you started.
Yeah.
And it's really just coming out into the open the way it never has before, I think.
Well, I think a lot of people know, if you know of Safe Futures, that of course we still have our crisis component, which is huge. We've done a lot of work on training police officers to recognize when somebody's at risk, and lethality assessment, something that our current executive director, Kathy Wernau, and Jeff Nixon, a police officer, have actually traveled to China and been invited to China to teach the people in China, their law enforcement, about this. So it's really becoming a very important part of ending domestic violence. But where is it going with this? In terms of what you were saying about what's current in the news, is you mentioned powerful people. And that's a big part of the education, is helping people recognize, because the powerful people, whoever they may be, the partner you're living with, the parents you're living with, on and on, want the victims to believe it was their fault, they invited it, and it must be something that they have to keep a secret. And that's why when people say things like, well, why are these people coming forward now after so many years? And well, that's the reason. It's fear, it's this whole stigma around this. So, and
we still do see some of the people coming forward being, judged what their part was.
Absolutely. What were you wearing? I mean, these are some of the questions when you talk about sexual assault. And when we go into classrooms, we say, what questions should we be asking? Should we be saying, well, why were you dressed in a mini skirt? Or how come you were out drinking and walking home late at night? Should we be saying, and then you got raped? No, we shouldn't be asking those questions. I mean, yes, there are matters of choices, but we should be saying, why did that person do that to you? That's the questions we should be asking. So, we have to flip this around so we're not blaming, re-victimizing. And that's why we have court advocates, that's why we have counseling, services to empower the people. And it's not just women, it does happen to men as well.
Sure.
That's
I'm guessing that's partly drove the name change.
Absolutely.
Because it's really not just women, and it might even be a bigger stigma for men.
Yeah, it definitely is.
It's women, men, and children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, you talk to teenage boys about what the statistics are for young men, this happening to a young man, and do you think it's easy to come forward? It's hard for anybody to come forward, but when you ask boys, why wouldn't you come forward if somebody did something that, you know, violated you? Well, the thought process, and this is where Patrick at our agency, you know, does a lot of work, is we have these stereotypes about what a real man is, and, you know, how could this happen to a real man? I must not be manly enough. Well, this is about power, this is about control and violence. So
now, in terms of crisis intervention, you have a hotline. What other services do you provide?
So we have a hotline. We have walk-in free counseling. Our counseling is very much around safety planning. And so safety planning could be anything from what rooms to stay out of when there's a possibility of violence. So do you know which rooms you should stay out of? A victim should stay out of?
No.
Okay. One would be the kitchen. Why?
Knives.
There's weapons, potential weapons. The other, and sometimes I laugh with young people, you know, they're so sweet and innocent. The other is the bathroom. And when I ask, why do you think it would be the bathroom? Well, some kids say, well, they could drown you. You know, well, that's true, but there's hard surfaces in a bathroom. So that's one piece of the safety planning. Also, do you have a neighbor who's aware of what's going on? Do you have a suitcase hidden someplace? Do you have an extra key for your car? So our counseling services are very much about safety planning. And we know that the average number of times somebody leaves a relationship and goes back is about 7. There's lots of reasons. For married people, it could be religious, it could be financial, it could be children, whatever it is. And so part of the training, right, is for the bystanders or the neighbors or the family members to be patient.
Yeah.
And never to blame or say things. As humans, when we love people, we want to say, why are you staying with this person? What's wrong with you? You know, and when you talk to teenagers, that's what they say. Oh, I want my friend to see. But the reality is the better thing to do, because we don't want to isolate people, is to say, are you okay? You seem really sad lately. Or you seem a little nervous around that person. Can I help out? Do you want to go talk to somebody? Those are some of the things that we offer. Court advocacy, the lethality training, which I mentioned Kathy Wernau is doing now. We have a transitional housing facility for people who are no longer in danger but need to rebuild their lives. We have, of course, our house for shelter.
Yeah.
So for a small agency, we offer an awful lot, but it's always a struggle. We always have people up at the State House asking for grants and money. And
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So.
And you know, when you mention the finances of it, I get worried because so many safety net services seem to be being cut now, and sometimes that is the only thing that allows people to leave a bad relationship, because most of the impoverished people in this country are mothers with children.
Yeah. We know that the homeless population, a good portion of those people are people who were in domestic violence situations, and that's why they're homeless, legally homeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And we also have to realize that when the mother's abused, the children witness this, and they go through trauma. So Safe Futures that provide a child advocate for those families. Also, you have to realize that when the person goes to court, they have that advocate with them, and they go to every meeting with those victims, sometimes as many as 4,500 court visits a year with the court advocates, which is an amazing number. And when you look at the number of people that have been helped each year, it's around 5,000 people. You know, that's just in our little New London County.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you've been volunteering with Safe Futures for quite a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
So what role do men have in, in bringing the message forward?
Well,
What can you do that we couldn't?
there are programs available. For example, there's a program that you can use with sports teams where the coaches talk about respect, and respect for yourself, respect for your school, and respect for women. And those have been put out. You can go and talk to coaches about them and see what they do. You can also donate money,
Yes.
which you can support your wives and your children. When you're in a group of men and they start talking about women in an objectifying way, you can speak up, or making bad jokes, you can speak up. You can let people know that you don't appreciate that and educate them a little bit. So there's things like that. You can do like Jeff Nixon's doing and work with the police departments so that when they go into the scene of domestic violence, they're not ignorant about the whole situation. They know what to do, how to handle it, have a formula for doing it. So there are many things. And if you're a boss or a worker someplace and you see something going on that shouldn't happen, you can be there and make it stop. So there's a lot you can do. But supporting women is really an important thing. And treating them as you would treat anyone else, as an equal. Not thinking you're superior to a woman. For me to go into Safe Futures and tell them what to do would be totally wrong, right? You tell me what you want me to do. Do you want me to go out and talk to florists? Or you want me to talk to hairdressers? Because the hairdressers hear these stories. You want me to do that? I'll do it, But you take the back seat and you listen and you try to do what's right.
Now, at this time of year in particular, what can people do to help Safe Futures?
So one thing that lots of people actually do, and I think this is true of a lot of agencies, at the holidays people get very generous and open-hearted, and then the rest of the year the agencies are floundering. So, we have, not just for our residents who are staying in our shelter or transitional housing, but anybody in the community who needs a Christmas or a holiday gift giving. We have a huge campaign of donations that come in, and elves, basically, people that come and wrap them. And the nice thing I think that happens is, so for instance, you can take a name, just like you can do in a lot of places, of a family name. The mother's gifts will be purchased and by these elves, volunteers, purchased and wrapped, but all the gifts for the children will be given to her along with the wrapping paper. Again, so it's not just about, oh, these people are so nice and they're giving to me. She feels a part of the whole thing, and her children are receiving these gifts from her. So that happens during the holiday season. And
now, is it too late for people to donate now?
No, it's not. And we're still receiving names, in fact. We're still getting people who say, oh, I don't have a Christmas, or I don't have a Hanukkah, or whatever holiday they celebrate. But throughout the year, there's any type of volunteer job that you feel you can do. Some people just like to be behind the scenes stuffing envelopes. Other people want to be interacting with the clients. If anybody who works directly with clients at Safe Futures must take a 40-hour training. So everybody has to be trained. So we just don't have random people. It's nice that people have open hearts, but you got to know what you're doing to help out with the residents. And the education piece is tremendous, and that takes a lot of training to go out into schools, because it isn't just, even though we have curricula, it isn't just about presenting a curriculum. It's about being able to field the questions that come up and know where to go.
And I assume being able to relate to these young people in a way that they'll be receptive.
Yes, absolutely. So, but we always need people to be, for instance, lots of places have these tables set up, and just to set up a table, like Bill does with some heifer things, and be able to just say, oh yes, we're Safe Futures. This is our address, and these are the things that are available. And so that's something that a person who wants to reach out educationally could do fairly easily.
Also, if a person is part of a PTA or a teacher, to advocate for this type of training in their school. Because, you know, as we said, with the education funding being cut back, this is one of the first things that's going to go, along with the music program and the arts, you know. So this is an opportunity for them to ask for it. In all the schools that it's been in, the teachers love it and the students love it. So it's something that...
Yeah, because it's very interactive, very fun. There's games, there's songs.
And the only issue is, I guess, funding things.
It is.
I know that in New London, Safe Futures was involved with the development of restorative practices in the schools.
Yes.
But it just seems like getting it spread beyond the pilot it's a challenge.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, you know, so Chris is our person she just recently got her master's in restorative practices, and she's very passionate about it, and she's very connected in the community. And so she offers staff trainings. That has been received well. Again, it's getting it beyond that point,
Right.
Which requires continued support and in services and all those things. So,
Yeah, those programs in restorative practice require the entire school to be involved, from the administration right down. Otherwise, it won't be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's true with almost everything. You really need total buy-in
Yeah.
if it's going to work.
yeah.
And I just wanted to mention the website for Safe Futures, because I didn't give it to people to type in ahead of time, is safefuturesct.org.
That's right. So it's CT, www.safefuturesct.org.
And they have lists with a lot of detail about what sort of gifts they'll accept now for the holidays, and also what kind of things people can donate year-round in terms of just everyday stuff.
Yes. Well, we have a wonderful, wonderful clothing, what are they calling it, the clothing closet or whatever. Volunteers who have been there for 20 years, who will receive clothing. You have to call. You can't just drop it off, but receive clothing, set them up in outfits for women, for men, for children, with the shoes. And anybody in the community can make an appointment and come in.
As long as they're referred.
Yes, they have to be referred from either a church or
Some other agency. Yeah.
Right, but they can come in and take what they need. So that's a nice thing.
So back when I was working for Head Start, if one of the parents of one of the kids needed clothes for a job interview,
Right.
Yes,
I could have referred them to
Yes.
this.
That's right.
that's right.
So
Yes.
I'm learning this 10 years too late.
Another thing you need to keep in mind, too, is that with the number of children that commit suicide, when Ann or other teachers go into these classrooms and talk about these things, sometimes students will come to them on the side, and I'm sure she saved quite a few lives. And, you know, it's really important.
Yeah, I've gotten, honestly, not just me, but, you know, personally, I have gotten letters as a teacher teaching about dating violence and letting the kids know what the dynamics are and everything, and letters saying, that extreme, I was ready to kill myself because I thought, all the way to, wow, I didn't realize that I'm really being mistreated, because I didn't know abuse could be other than hitting. You know, a lot of people just think, well, it's not abuse if they're putting you down, calling you names, telling you're stupid, telling you're fat, all these things that make you feel like nothing. And it's like this huge eye-opener, which is wonderful. And the other thing that a lot of young people talk about is what's going on at home. And that's why the educators have to be educators that have been trained in this work.
Well, I wanted to spend some time to talk about other charities. We kind of intentionally, well, or maybe not so intentionally, wanted to focus on one organization that has a very local focus and one that has a broader focus geographically, because, you know, different people want to give to in different ways, and there's so much need that, you know, and so much opportunity as well. So we're going to talk about some other organizations and their work that you might want to consider. And if anyone wants to call in, we can put the phone number up and talk about an organization they've been involved with, they've given to, that they respect. You know, you're welcome to. So do we want to start with something else that is local, or do we want?
That would be fine.
So if people are thinking, okay, you know, we see our neighbors, we know a lot of them are hurting, have needs, so what can we do?
Well, if you don't know which of the many organizations that are local you want to support, you might consider the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut, which researches each of these organizations and gives grants to them. So that would be a good place to donate. Also, if you have an interest in Haitian education, for example, the Crosby Fund for Haitian Education, run by Becky Crosby in the Old Lyme area, that fund, you can send a child to school. For a couple $100, you can send a child to elementary school for the year. Or for a couple of $1,000, you can send them to college.
Well,
as opposed to here, where it's $50,000.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess one reason that some people might choose to give money either to a big organization or a local group that is focused on somewhere else is dollars go very far in many of these countries with a lot of need.
That's right. And you have to think about that. If you give to the American Cancer Society, for example, because you've had someone with cancer and you say you gave them $50, it's an insignificant change in what their total budget is. But if you gave $50 to a group that is local that has a $1,000 budget, that's significant. So those things matter. If you're military-minded, and we have a lot of people from Coast Guard or people from the Navy in the area, and you know, one area that our daughter-in-law is very involved in is the Semper Fi Fund, which is for the wounded Marines that, you know, they're the first ones in, they take all the flack. Locally, though, we also have the Visiting Nurses Association. I know they were wonderful with my mother and my father-in-law when, you know, they were basically unable to get around anymore. They could come to your home. And also people that are dying, you know, in hospice care. Up in Norwich, the Center for Hospice Care is a great organization that provides not just help for that person, but also for the whole family, some counseling for the family of the matters of death. So that's a great thing. And one great organization that has a big fundraiser and gala every year is the Martin Luther King Scholarship Trust Fund, which allows children in our local schools here to receive scholarships to go to college. And a lot of these are children of various minority groups, and they never would have had the opportunity to go. And it's just a wonderful organization for them.
Well, when you emailed me, you mentioned that Anne was involved, I think, in Read to Grow.
Yeah.
So
now that's local as well,
That's
correct?
local, and I'm also involved in another group called Days for Girls.
Okay, tell us about those.
So Read to Grow, I found this very exciting because, again, because of my violence prevention brain and thinking about the very start of all this. So Read to Grow is an organization that puts together packets of books for very young children, and a volunteer, which I'm not yet doing but hoping to, because they're starting this up in Bacchus Hospital. New London already has this, and they have volunteers doing it. Volunteer will go when a mom has a new baby, and before they're actually discharged, go with this lovely packet of books, and also some information about now they're including technology and how that affects the very, you know, that children shouldn't be placed in front of the computer or whatever. And talk to them about the fact that we know the research is showing that children who are read to, when they start school, have thousands of more vocabulary words than
Yeah.
children who are not. So when I'm thinking, I know children who come in and they fail at school and they fail, and then eventually you don't know where they're going to end up on this end. So I find that very exciting.
Well, it's probably great for the parents too, because I was a preschool teacher, and one statistic that even goes beyond what you were saying is that a typical middle class kid entering kindergarten will not only have a larger vocabulary than his or her peer that came from a very low income family that might not have had access to books, but is likely to have a bigger vocabulary than that child's parent.
Yes.
So when we bring high quality books into kids' lives, even kids' books, they help develop the parents' enjoyment of reading and comfort with reading.
Yeah. So I'm excited about this. I hope that it's a go. In fact, yesterday, my contact person at Read to Grow, locally, said she had a meeting with the people at Bacchus and was hoping that they would be on board with this, and then that could get started there. So it's a growing kind of
That's great.
Days for Girls.
Now that isn't so local, but talk about it.
Well, there's a local chapter. There's a local chapter. So Days for Girls, and I do participate in this on Crossroads at the Presbyterian Church once a week on Mondays. Anybody who wants to show up can show up from like 12:30 to 3:30. And we actually put together these beautiful, they look like backpacks. And yes, they don't go to people in the United States because we don't have the taboo about menstruation. But in countries, particular Africa is right now the focus for this organization. When a girl starts to menstruate, she basically drops out of school because they don't have the products, and there's all of these superstitions and taboos. This they can wear as a backpack. Everything is washable, beautiful. Many of the local fabric stores donate fabrics, and we make them. We put them all together, and then right now they actually have somebody who travels to these countries and brings them, and now is starting to teach them how to do this. But I find it very empowering for girls. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't think about some of the things that are so simple that can have such a huge impact. I mean, imagine girls' education stopping at age 12 or 13 or 14 for something that we wouldn't consider it.
It's all stacked against the girls, because if you have limited income, the boys get to go to school and the girls stay home. Okay. Then if you happen to have enough income to send your girl to school, she might get a couple of years. And if you're really well, she goes all the way up to this point, and then she has to drop out, and that's not a good thing. So Heifer also, supports that idea that we need to do stuff for those girls so they can continue their education. So it's a great synergy between those.
And for them, and also because the world needs women as a resource.
Yeah. Yes. You have to read Half the Sky. And you realize half the world's population has been disempowered.
So
what we can do with that.
We have about 4 more minutes, so let's talk about a few more charities.
Okay. Well, there's Covenant House in Manhattan. This is an organization that rescues thousands of young girls who have run away from home that wind up in New York City, who are usually subject to pimps turning them into prostitutes and things like this. So it rescues them from from prostitution, gives them a place to live and food and everything, and helps to get them back from where they wound up.
And I'm guessing young enough so that they really are in a position that...
They're teenagers.
Yeah.
Certainly the Connecticut Food Bank is great. For $1, they can put out a bunch of meals. It's amazing. They're really, so anything you can give to the Connecticut Food Bank, financially or donating food, but financially too, makes a huge difference. And then we have homeless people, and we have the Homeless Hospitality Center. Catherine Zahl is going to be talking here in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Right.
We'll have a show. The whole show will be talking about homelessness in Connecticut and what the Homeless Hospitality Center does.
Right. There's another one. Ann and I both volunteer at the Women's Prison at York here, teaching decision making. But they also have religious programs there. Sacred Place is what's called. And one of our congregants lost her daughter there, a suicide. So there's something called the Barber Fund, part of the Sacred Place thing, which we support. We feel very strongly about that. Our experience in the prison is that most of the women there are victims. And they've been victimized all their lives. So anything you could do to help them to get their lives back is helpful. And I don't want to pass over Doctors Without Borders. It goes into the worst places in the world. They've lost a lot of people over the last couple of years because the Islamic State doesn't recognize them and shoots them. And, but these people are dedicated. Every dollar you spend goes right to the use. Everything else is paid for by the doctors. And then Oxfam, like Heifer, Oxfam is involved in a lot of places around the world, does a lot of political advocacy with the governments to try to get poor people a better break. So, you know, we have the Gemma Moran Food Bank here. We have, it's all kind of like,
yeah, you know. There's really no end.
No.
So if anyone is thinking about giving to charities, there are dozens of local things that, you know, or probably have branch offices in your town that you can walk into, and so many that also serve people around the world. And, you know, I know the question has come up in the past, you know, why should we be donating to people far away when there are so many people hurting here? Well, if you want to donate to people hurting here, that's fine. But sometimes what's happening in other places, we had a hand in creating that bad situation. And we do have some responsibility beyond just our town and our state and our country.
We do.
So in the last minute we have, can each of you just briefly tell how people can find out how to give more or support Heifer and how to support Safe Futures?
Well, again, for Heifer, just go on the web. Everybody does this now, unless you're very old and don't want to learn. Heifer.org, and it's right there, the whole catalog. We have the whole catalog online, and you can do that.
Likewise, besides Safe Futures website, which we have already mentioned, we're right in the neighborhood, and
right
9 to 5, anybody can stop in if they want to inquire about what the needs are, yeah.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Anne. We're out of time. Next week, Myrna and Eric are going to take on the show. I'm not sure what the subject is. And then in 2 weeks, we'll have Kathy Zoll on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And everyone out there, let's think about what we can do this season to make a difference.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Rana.
Yeah.